Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Radio Dayz, a podcast radio program that delves into the world of terrestrial radio. It's DJs and on-air personality, and you, all fans of radio as a medium. Here's your host, Ron.
Hello and welcome to Radio Dayz The Podcast. You can hear this podcast on Buzzsprout as well as all the major podcast platforms. You can also watch this podcast via YouTube and at ronrobinsonstudios.com. In this episode, which is brought to you by Team 71 Mortgage Group and Radio Dayz, the docuseries, we're going to take a deep dive into the radio and television broadcasting career of a Detroit staple. Very excited about this week's show as we welcome a Detroit radio and television broadcaster. In fact, I believe, and I'll clarify this with him when he comes on, that his entire broadcasting career has been right here in Southeast Michigan. And although the start of his career was in radio, now he is recognized for the work he does on Detroit television. His first job in radio was at WJR FM, if I'm not mistaken. His was the first voice heard on WDFN The FAN, and now he's known as that movie review guy. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sugar Bear himself, Mr. Greg Russell. Greg, how are you, sir?
Doing great, Ron. Glad to be here with you.
Good, glad. Now, before we get started, I want to thank you for taking part of my upcoming docuseries about the history of radio, Radio Dayz 101 Years of Radio. It's a docuseries coming very, very soon. You, like so many others, Greg, gave me some great content. I can't wait for people to see this. It's turned out great. It's coming up very soon. I'll have some news on its release and that. But again, you are so great in this docuseries because you brought so many different pieces of insight from different eras. You were one of the last interviews I did, and I got to tell you, it was your interview really kind of seeds through all 5 episodes, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time.
Oh, you got it. I enjoyed it. I enjoy now sharing the stories because, when you think about it, it's been, over 40 years.
Yeah.
Which is hard since I'm only 32, so.
It happens. It's weird. And now, like I mentioned, you've started in TV, and we're going to talk a lot about your career today.
Okay.
But before we get into your career, this is something that I always ask my guests to go before their career. What were you listening to on the radio when you were growing up? What really turned you on, and what made you start listening to the radio as someone who was
Yep, I can even do the jingle. Dun dun dun. CKLW, the Motown sound. Dun, 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 dun. Yep, the big H, CKLW. Because I love Motown and I love the Beatles, and it seems like they were always playing them. And then the other good part about CKLW is by them being in Canada at that time, they didn't have the restrictions as far as the power, the wattage they could put out. So when we would go up to our family cottage in Paw Paw, Michigan, which is right next to Kalamazoo, you could listen to CKLW all the way from your front door in Detroit to the porch of the cottage. And, that was just great.
Were there any jocks specifically that reached to you? Or,
Wow.
personalities you can remember?
Trying to think.
Because you're right, the jingles were legendary. CKLW, the Motor City.
Yeah. I think once I got a little bit older and, really started paying attention to the jocks, of course, Dick Burton, and all the guys over at WRIF, like when I was in high school, because that's when it was like, okay, we're listening to Pink Floyd and everything, and 101 FM, WRIF, Arthur Penhallow, and, all those guys. So loved all of them.
It's one thing to be a fan of radio as a medium. When and how did you know that you wanted to pursue a career in radio?
Well, when I was in college, and actually I went to the University of Detroit.
Mercy. That's even more legendary. Come on.
Yes. And so when I was a student there, I used to do all the voiceover work for everybody's project, that they were doing in media class, and especially my own. In fact, it got to a point where it was funny, Ron. We had to do individual productions of a show. And our instructor said, okay, I'm going to make it hard on everybody. With the exception of Greg, none of you can use him as your talent in your show.
Oh,
so
boy.
It was like, they're all going, well, there goes my C. But yeah, I just, started doing that. And then what had happened was, right before I got ready to graduate, that's when WJR FM, it had been an automated station. Basically, for those who don't know what automation means, it basically was just run by a machine. There were no people there. Well, they were going to go live. And the assistant program director at that time, a guy named Gene Krzyzewski, was a U of D grad. So he called over to the school saying, hey, we're looking for somebody to do evenings. You guys got anybody who might just be graduating who, be good enough to play beautiful music, which was the stuff we used to hear in elevators. So they said, yeah, we got this guy, Greg Russell, who'll be graduating soon. So I went down to see them. We talked. I did an audition tape. And a week later, they called up saying, congratulations on your graduation because you've got a job. And it's like, yes.
Tell me you still have that tape. Tell me you still have that tape.
I wish I did.
Oh,
I wish. You know what? I probably do because, as my wife will tell you, I never have thrown away anything. I still have my G.I. Joes from the 1960s. So it's probably somewhere in my effects.
I just recently came across my first demo that I made when I was a student at Specs at WNLD. This is WNLD, Rock and Ron coming at you. It's so bad. It's horrible. It's horrible. It's embarrassing. It doesn't need to be out there. It needs to be burned.
No.
Let's move on. Let's talk about your first job in radio. How did that present itself? And obviously it was WJR FM, but talk a little bit more about that experience because this is your first experience in the business of something you grew up listening to.
Right. I mean, it was great the way it was, set up for me. I did evenings. And like I said, it was a beautiful music station. Again, the stuff that they used to play, we always called it elevator music and all like that. So I didn't have to be, per se hyped or, do a lot because our listening audience at the time, was older people. They were listening to me to go to sleep at 8 o'clock at night. So, I was able to, it was just great because it was all on tape. I mean, the music was on tape. So I'd come in and do my break and go, you're listening to 96 FM, WJR FM, Detroit. And now, here's Montavani to get you motivated.
That is awesome. That is awesome. That doesn't, I mean, you can make that argument. It doesn't even sound like your everyday voice.
Right.
You got that radio voice. Like Alan Allman. Remember how big he was? Oh, my gosh.
I worked with Alan, 2 times, once at WNIC, then also when he went over to WMJC. For a little bit. And he was a nice guy. Nice guy.
Yeah. But he captured people's imagination. No question. Yep. Power of radio. All right. So I've always contended that a broadcaster learns more about their craft in their second gig than their first gig. A, do you agree with that? And B, where was your second job in radio?
My second job was at WOMC. They called me up and they were looking for another person, to do evenings. And I think it was, remember radio was such a small community. We all knew each other.
Right.
So I had friends over there who said, hey, get Greg. He's got talent and can do a lot of things. And, he can move up from Montavani to actually playing the Beatles and Lionel Richie and the Commodores and all that at the time. So Dave Schaefer hired me over there. I did evenings, I think it was 8 to midnight. Or 7 to midnight, at the time. And it was a lot of fun because that's just it. When you were young, you'd get off the air at midnight. Hey, you could still go out and have a good time,
right.
For a couple hours. Then go home, get enough sleep so you can go back in. So, and that also was when we were playing all the music on carts. So we had that.
They look like 8 tracks. For people on radio, they look like 8 tracks.
That's right. And I also loved the fact that, I was playing new music. So it was great going, hey, here's Kokomo by the Beach Boys that just came out last week, type thing.
Now, what year was this? Just
that was 1980.
Okay.
I was there, I think, from 80 to 81 or 82, something like that.
In 1980, did you take a job at WJBK as a reporter?
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
Talk about that. How did that present itself?
Yeah, there was a show called PM Magazine. And for those of you who don't remember it, it was pretty much every major city in the country, New York, LA, Chicago, Detroit, had a PM Magazine show. It was a lifestyle show that came on at about 7 p.m., no matter where you were. And somehow or another, it got into the newspaper on a Sunday that PM Magazine is looking for a new tipster reporter. Basically, the guy or girl who's going to go out and show you fun things to do in the city.
Right.
Well, Channel 2 at the time, that was before they were Fox, but Channel 2 at the time got bombarded with phone calls from people wanting to come in and audition. So Helen Love, who was the executive producer of the show at that time, and she and I still remain good friends, she told me that they decided, well, you know what? we've got all these people. Let's turn this kind of like into a show, seeing how people, what they're going to do to try and get this job on TV. So they set it up for, I think it was like a Monday and Tuesday, where they had it where you'd come in, do a 30-second audition on camera. And so they said, we want you to do something that is, basically Detroit and or Michigan. And they had us lined up around like 5 deep. So it's like,
Wow.
you'd be in front of me, somebody be in front of you. So as soon as you're done, I'm up. As soon as I'm done, they just walk up. So
that had to be a little bit intimidating because there's all these other people,
You're listening to everybody else's stuff. And the weirdest part is one guy in front of me was talking about like hang gliding over the dunes on the west side of the state of Michigan. And another one was talking about, sailing and deep sea diving like in the Detroit River. My story was about the history of the Boston Cooler, the famous drink that we all love here.
Oh, yes, with the Verners, right?
That's right. And how it all got started, I used to always wonder, why is it called a Boston Cooler, but it started here in Detroit? Well, Boston Boulevard in Detroit, big, beautiful area. I mean, that's where, at the time, the richest of the rich lived around here. Well, the people who work for them every year would have a summer contest to come up with something refreshing for the folks there to drink.
Right.
So suddenly somebody said, hey, I'm going to take some Berner's ice cream, put some Berner's ginger ale and Vanilla Stroh's ice cream in there.
Delicious.
And mix it up. Thus the Boston Cooler.
Part of growing up in Detroit is having those Boston Cooler. It's like Coney Island, right? Same thing.
For sure. So that was my story. And I'm walking away. I mean, I had a lot of fun with it. And I walked away thinking, I don't think I can beat hang gliding or anything like that.
I think you beat them. The Detroiters think you beat them.
The next morning, I got a phone call from Helen Love saying, congratulations, you're our new tipster reporter.
That's fantastic.
Oh, my goodness. And it was a blast because I think I was like around 23 or something at the time.
So what kind of stories did you cover? Because that sounds like in 1980, there's a lot going on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I jumped out of airplanes, went water skiing, snow skiing. Oh, man. Pretty much every little, place around Michigan. I mean, we went to St. Ignace, we went to Mackinac to talk about all the fun things you could do there.
Wow, that's
cool. And
cool.
Of course, here in Detroit, that was so cool, taking people on a tour of like the Motown Museum and, going to Greektown back when it was old Greektown, remember the way it looked
back when those bag lady would yell at you when you stayed too long.
Right.
Yeah. I don't remember her name, but man, she was ruthless.
Oh, yeah. And then the other favorite part was
old
every
school.
year, you'd go to the state fair and you'd hang around waiting for the cow to have her calf. It's like, come on, hey, we don't have that much time. But yeah, got to do so much stuff and meet so many different people. I mean, it was just a wonderful time. And also because of age, just having so much energy. That was great.
As a little side note, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but when you were just talking about that as a child, they still do that kind of stuff over at the Berrien County Youth Fair over in Southwest Michigan.
Yeah.
I used to work at a station called WSJM over there, Benton Harbor, St. Joe. And It was probably my favorite radio station I ever worked at because we were run like a major market radio station, but we were a small town. And to this day, me and my wife will still go over there in the summertime in August for the Berrien County Youth Fair, where they still do the 4-H and they have the horse competition and they bring in the big acts of the day for the weekend. It's like being a kid over there. So if you weren't aware of that, I highly recommend the Berrien County Youth Fair. But that's part of growing up in Detroit, and so much has changed. Mm-hmm. But I think I asked you specifically about what kind of things you got to do, but talk about some of the news stories that kind of made an impact on you at that time, because you're young. This is what your broadcasting is, and it had to be quite make quite an impact on you, I'm sure.
Yes. In fact, we'll go back to WOMC. So it's 1980. And as you can probably tell by looking behind you, I'm a big Beatles fan. There's the Beatles' second album.
I think your phone cover is the Beatles, right?
Yep, it was. Yeah. Yep, it is. And then even got to play on a Ringo drum kit in Liverpool. So always, love them. December the 8th, 1980, and I'm at WOMC. And so, working at night, you're the only person there. So we would always have like the studio door open because the newsroom door was open. And as you remember back in the day when a big news story or anything, like if weather was going to turn bad, you'd hear the bells on the, machine, ding, 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 ding.
Right.
And you'd go in and find, okay, it's going to be a snowstorm or what have you. But I remember it was somewhere around 9 o'clock at night on a Monday. Next thing you know, it sounded like, when I say Christmas, because it was ding, 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 ding. And it's like, whoa, what the heck's going on? So I go across and look on the teletype, and it says, "Flash from New York: former Beatle John Lennon has been shot."
Oh no.
And and that was all it said. Just that one line. Like, what? And so then, it just kept going like every couple of minutes. Been taken to the hospital, being operated on.
It was like JFK all over again, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then, finally the one came across, former Beatle John Lennon dead at the age of 40. And because we don't have things the way we do now, I mean, like now someone sneezes, you've got it on your phone, everything else, it's immediate. I called up our program director, Dave Schaefer, at the time, and I told him, I said, he picks up the phone, I said, "Hey Dave, this is Greg at the station, what should I do?" And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Oh, you haven't heard?" And he says, "No," because he was at home, honestly, he said, "I'm reading a book,
Had
and
no
nothing
clue.
had come across." And I told him, he said, "Oh my God." He says, "Okay, forget the programming we already have. You can play as many Beatles songs, John Lennon songs, and all like that, that you want." And all of a sudden, our phone lines just got bombarded with people calling, of course,
Right.
crying and upset. And, we just played all that different type of music. But that had to be, the most horrific,
Yeah.
night just being on the air, because it's like you said, it was like when I was 7 years old and Kennedy got killed. You're just going, gosh, what?
It doesn't seem real. It's kind of
Right.
like 9/11 was the same thing. It doesn't seem real.
Right, right. It's
Yeah.
like you're going to wake up from this dream or
Yeah.
nightmare.
So that's a cool gig, and you're doing some cool stories, experiencing some amazing opportunities. But where did you go from there? Why did you leave there, and what happened?
Let's see. I left WOMC, and where did I go next? I think it was a deal. I wound up doing more stories on PM Magazine.
Okay.
So it was like, well, I kind of make it about the same amount of money. All like that. Everything was worked out. So I went there. And then when PM Magazine began to, fade a little bit, I wound up going to WCXI, which was the country station.
Yes, 11:30.
There you go. There you go. And
Dino Day, that was must listen to.
oh, another person who I absolutely loved him, because I started there just doing the news on the weekends. Because believe it or not, like I tell people, it was a country station, but honest to goodness, they had the #1 news station in Detroit at that time. They won all the AP awards, UPI awards, and everything else. So it was good. And then that's when all of a sudden,
You know what? I don't want to interrupt, but that was to me like when before FM became king, CXI took over for what the Big Eight was doing. It was like it was the next generation of that. It was popular music. They had entertaining jocks. It was people listened to that station all the time.
Oh yeah, and I mean, especially that's when John Travolta's movie Urban Cowboy came out.
Yeah, yeah.
And that made country music and being a country person, sexy and sharp. And so at that time, WCXI, or Golden West Broadcasters, who was the owner, bought 92.3 FM, which before that was Tower Radio downtown in the Renaissance Center.
Yeah.
And so they said, okay, we got an FM station. We're going to be looking for people. I said, hey, I want to be a DJ again. Put me back on. They said, well, the only spot we have is midnight to 6 a.m. Fine. Because as it turns out, that's when the people who are listening to that type of music, that's when they were partying and having a good time and calling you up.
Yeah.
And those were probably 5 of the most fun years I had in radio. Like I said,
just talk a little bit. What kind of radio were you doing, Greg?
okay, there it was country.
No, I mean, as an on-air personality, you had to be doing bits. What was some of the stuff that you liked to do when you were on the air?
Oh, geez. We would have it where, especially like on a Friday night, just, hey, you just getting back from the bar? Give me a call. And people would be going, I and, they would be drunk and you didn't have any way to check or anything. And a lady would call up, hi, what are you doing? I got to get off the phone.
Yeah. And that's interesting because it's funny that you went to the phones, because to me, the phones are so integral to being an on-air person, a good on-air personality, utilizing the phones. That's why Lee Allen was so good. That's why Doug Podell, others like people who use the phones find great success. And that's but at that hour, I can't even imagine. We're at Taco Bell. Greg, you want a taco? I mean, I'm just.
Oh, there was one time I said something. I was on the air going, man, because I used to do bar nights too. So You do a bar night starting at like 7 o'clock, go to 11, and then have to go to the station. Again, the best part about being young, in your 20s, you had that energy. And I remember one time I went on the air and I said something along the lines of, I just got done at my, bar night at wherever. Gosh, I'm hungry. There was almost a line of people at the back door of the station bringing pizzas, hamburgers, everything. And so it's like, come on in, let me give you a tour. And, it's like, good. They were all listening. And just another funny one, Ron, I got to tell you, just when you mentioned Dino Day, like I said, I can tell people, he was the, CMA country DJ for like 5 or 6 years in a row, which meant he beat out every other country DJ in the country. And I also have to give credit to his producer, Al Rosenberg, who's the one who put together, the tapes that they would send in for the people to listen to. But Dino used to have it on Friday. There was this guy he called the Chug-a-Lugger. Guy, he worked overnight at one of the car plants. And when he would get home, especially on Friday, since he didn't have anything else to do, he would just start drinking. So Dino would have him on at 8 in the morning. The guy got off, I think, at 6 a.m. Have him on at 8 in the morning after this guy has, had a few. And he would always go, and we know the week. Okay, Chug-a-Lugger, open your beer. And you'd hear the psst and go. And they play the Lone Ranger theme. And you could hear this guy, gulping down the beer. And he says, the weekend is ready when the Chug-a-Lugger goes. Give this long burp. There was one time, I think he might have had the night off, so he'd been drinking all night. And so you could even tell by his voice, he says, okay, the whole thing, and the weekend starts when the Chug-a-Lugger goes, ooh. And he said, well, whole new start to the weekend with this one, so.
That's great radio. That's great radio. That's great radio. So I come back to the question. I kind of scanned over it, but do you feel like you learned more from your second job than you did your first?
And yeah. I mean, you especially, like I said, by coming from beautiful music where all you had to do was just, read what was on the card and all like that. The second, for sure, because you were, more so ad-libbing. You had to think of stuff.
Right.
And, be quick because, like I said, people would still call in and, just have to keep them entertained. And then even from the second job at WMC, then moving to WCXI, like I said, it was amazing at the time. There were so many people listening to overnight radio where myself and Joe Jackson, who was on the AM, we were, you know what I mean when I say this, just as popular as the people during the day.
Absolutely.
Everyone knew you.
Different audience.
Right. So you always had to be on your toes and always had to remember that even if you're tired or not having a good day, you're an entertainer. So you've got to entertain, be it one person or 100,000, whatever, out there listening.
You mentioned Dick Purton earlier. He infamously came to Keener to do the 10 to 1, and that's where he really was able to spread his wings and what eventually turned him into mornings, and then he became a morning man. But he started his shtick, if you will, from 10 to 1 a.m. on Keener. That's a great time to do that. Was the Electrifying Mojo another one who took advantage of those hours, right?
That guy, people still, talk about him today. His audio that's like on YouTube, from the old shows, has millions of hits because, people love, here comes the mothership.
Oh, it was great, right?
Right, the Electrifying Mojo, and, have like the Parliament Funkadelic song, whatever it was, and it's like, you just listen to him. It's like, I'm going to play nothing but Vantavanti tonight. We don't care. It's Mojo.
I want to ask you specifically because we were talking about WCXI and your time there.
Yeah.
You were there when 1130 went from WCXI to WDFN. Yours was the first voice heard over WDFN The FAN. Talk about that.
Yeah, it was great because at that time I'd already left CXI and I was working as a news reporter for the then Channel 50 News. And this just goes to show how great things are out in the universe. I had covered a murder story and I was just so depressed about it. I mean, it's just that's it takes a special person really as far as a news person to be able to go out and do those type of stories all the time.
It's tough.
It is. So I went home that night and I just kind of sat there going, man, I wish I could get something else, because I'm tired of this. So I took the next day off. The next day I get a phone call from Art Regner. And he goes, hey, Greg, we're putting together this sports station in Detroit. We thought about you. Would you like to come work for it? Yes! I didn't even know what I was saying yes to. It could have been, oh, okay, we got the new guy who's painting the walls. I don't care.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But he said, yeah, we'd like for you to be one of our update reporters on the morning show. Fabulous. So went over there, and so all of us were, by being a brand new station, it was almost like going to school, because that was the first station that any of us had ever worked at that was all basically computer controlled.
Right.
We had the touch screens, which were brand new, and the digital editing, which none of us had seen before. So we would go over there, we learn all this stuff. So the day we were ready to kick off the morning, mine was, going to be the first voice you'd hear at 6 a.m., just, good morning. You're listening to WDFM, AM 1130, your sports station here in the Motor City. And, then go, here's what happened last night. Tigers did this, Pistons did this, so and so. So I'm pushing the button on the screen, and it's not lighting up. So I'm just going, what the heck? I'm going, this crap doesn't work. What's wrong here? This is bad. Why not? And Tevis Markham, who was the producer of the morning show, stuck his head out going, it's working. It's
working. Oh. We're on the air.
Oh. Good morning, folks. Welcome to WDFN Sports Radio. And boom, that's how it all started.
People think of, obviously Stoney and Wojo and Greg and Jamie. Rob Parker started there. I think Rob was with Stoney originally, if I'm not mistaken. But they know that the guys who have the shows, but talking to you, you'd be out in public and people would be like, hey, Sugar Bear, like you got a lot of notoriety from that show. How was that? Because it's one thing to be in radio. It's another thing when you're out in public and people know who you are. Talk about, because was that your first brush with fame, if you will?
Sort of, kind of. I mean, because the funny part is, even to this day, it's 30 years later, I'll still be out someplace every blue moon. Hey, Sugar Bear! And it's like, all right.
Yeah.
I should tell you this story very, very quickly. Anytime, I've only been, we've all been pulled over for speeding, especially when you were younger. There was one time I was in a community where the speed limit changed as soon as you crossed one street. So I was doing the speed limit on one side, but as soon as you cross the street, boom, I'm doing like 5 over.
Right.
So it was kind of a little speed trappy thing. So I got pulled over. Cop gave me the ticket. And my deal is, anytime I've ever gotten a ticket, I go to court, just to fight it, just to see if you're lucky.
If the cop doesn't show up, you're good.
Right. So I went to court, and so I'm sitting out there in the hallway, and so the bailiff walks by, and he looks, and he's going, I know you. I said, yeah. He says, oh, at the time he's going, oh, the guy from TV. Yeah, it's great. So he walks into the magistrate's office, and you could hear them whispering, and the guy goes, Greg Russell, Sugar Bear? And I just thought, I'm good.
Tell me you got off.
Yep. Oh, case got dismissed. We took photos with each other.
That's when it's good, when you don't have to drop, do you know who I am? Because they know who you are. That's fantastic. That's awesome. So talk about your experience. I mean, you rubbed elbows with a lot of great broadcasters, a lot of Detroit broadcasters, and you yourself, obviously the reason you got hired was, you're a fantastic broadcaster. To me, when I look at the group of people that were there, and I mentioned some of the others, Sabrina West, Sabrina Black.
Wow.
Jamie Samuelson is someone that I've never got to meet, but oh my gosh, our mutual friends just rave about him. He's a great guy. But talk about some of the people who made a lasting impact, if you will, while you were there.
Oh, geez, like you said, over there, I mean, it was everybody. There's Larry Sorensen, Butch Stearns, Rob Parker. We still talk, to this day, and he's off doing great things, now out in L.A. Stoney. Oh, it's always just like running into your cousin or brother whenever we run into each other, someplace. Ike the Mega Man. Talked to him a couple of years back. I think it was during COVID, because he was doing some type of, special show. And somebody, when his producer thought, I'm just going to bring in all these guests who he doesn't even know are showing up. And so, got to talk to him. He's doing well, because he had been sick for a while. He'd had a stroke, but now he's doing, much, much better. Oh, and, even again, just the folks you got to meet. I remember back in the day, there was a place called Andrews on the corner, basically down the street from where the radio station was. And so, like, if I was covering the Pistons, Jamie or Jennifer might have been doing the Red Wings or something that night, or a Tigers game. Back then, we'd all have to go to the station after it was over at, 11 o'clock midnight, load our stuff in just so it would be ready. Then we'd all go to Andrews and have a drink. And it was great because, after the Red Wing games, they'd be down there at the time having a good time. I mean, that was the first time I actually met Darren McCarty, who now has become, a good friend, and some of the other guys, would be down there. And you got to hang out with these people, especially like covering the Pistons. I was there covering them during the Grant Hill times. So,
I wanted to ask you about that. You worked for the Detroit Pistons. How did that opportunity come to be, and what did they hire you to do?
I was a member of the Detroit Pistons Speakers Bureau, which was something they had really special back then, where you would go to schools and talk to kids, just to let them know, about going to school, finishing, working hard, and doing different things like that. And then the Pistons would hire me sometimes, just to be a guest speaker for something else. But I loved it. That's when Tom Wilson was there and all that whole group. And it was just kind of magical. I mean, I live in the city, and you remember where the Palace was.
Yes.
Now I happen to drive out to the lot or past the lot, every blue moon. And it kind of makes a little tear come, because it was just so much fun working over there. But then I realized how far it was, and I would do it like 2-3 times a week.
Yeah, it's a trek from the city.
Yeah. But, go out there and, I remember meeting like Grant's parents and all that, and just so many other people. Mr. Davison, who owned the Pistons at the time, actually became friends with his family, and his wife's daughter, Liz, actually was an actress in LA, and she was in, several different movies. So, it was just a fun time.
That's a great segue, because take a listen to this.
Good. I had to put this on to see what you thought.
Oh, you look very sharp, man. Very cowboy.
Could have been right there in the part with you as one of the Texas Rangers.
Go. Sure. There you go.
It's truly a modern-day Western.
Man, if there was one medicinal quality we could hope for in any kind of art, it's empathy.
Yeah.
Just care for your fellow.
I have to tell you, that's a clip of you interviewing the guys from Hell or High Water, the movie.
Oh, geez.
And I loved watching this, because two of my favorite actors, first off, Ben Foster, I love that guy, and Jeff Bridges. To me, Jeff Bridges is one of the walking. I'm fascinated with how he has progressed, because when you look at some of his work when he was younger, now he's like Chong. Like you would think Chong would be after smoking all that. Like, I don't know what happened to him, but he's still, no matter what he's in, even to this day, brings his A game. And I mean, one of my favorite movies, it's a Remote Dropper, is Blown Away with him and Tommy Lee Jones. But I love Jeff Bridges. So I want to ask you specifically about, before we jump into your Movie Show Plus program, talk to me about your thoughts about those two actors I just mentioned, because big fans of those guys.
Love them both, and it's so amazing you picked that clip out of anything, out of all of them. We were in Texas. I can't remember now if it was Austin.
How could I not? You were wearing a cowboy hat, Greg. It was fantastic.
Yep, we were down there, and we were at the premiere, and they had it at this really neat theater. I mean, it was I think it was actually owned by a brewery or something, because you had your regular theater seats, but you basically had a bar in front of you, or place like to put your drinks.
Sure.
So me and my guys happened to be sitting right behind Jeff and the rest of the crew. Everybody was lit up, if you know what I mean, just drinking and having a good time. An actor who I just don't want to, I shouldn't put his name out, just because of what he did. He was so, drunk that at the end when they had a Q&A, he's on stage and he pulls out a cigarette. Now, as you know, you can't smoke anywhere. He's smoking, and somebody asked him a question, and his answer just rambled and rambled. But that had to be one of the most fun times, because they were having a ball.
Yeah.
That's all they were doing, just having a ball. Jeff has always been a great and fun guy to interview. I mean, like you said, just so laid back, not full of himself. I mean, you know what I mean? Just, you're like, oh, don't you know who I am? I was in the Last Picture Show. Well, but just always a lot of fun. Always.
Yeah, I know he gets a lot of love for the Baker Boys.
Oh,
but
yeah.
man, he, to me, there's Against All Odds, that's my guilty pleasure from '84 with the great soundtrack by Phil Collins. But Jeff Bridges, what was it? What was that? Crazy Heart?
Oh yeah.
What a phenomenal performance in that movie. Yeah.
And another one where he had a role in, even though it was kind of small, was in Albert Brooks. I love Albert Brooks.
Yeah.
But his movie The Muse.
Oh,
Jeff
yeah.
is just so funny as being
Yes.
kind of like, out of this world producer. You're just going, yeah, I'll bring food. You need food? I'll bring food.
I think he can do anything. Starman. Anyway, we'll go off on a tangent on Jeff Bridges, but Ben Foster, he, to me, has taken a career arc that's quite fascinating, because I think one of his first movies was he played like a love interest, a kind of a boy next door, and then he became very alpha dog. That's like, and then he started playing those roles. Then he started dating Sean Penn's ex-wife. This guy is all over the place. How can you not love him? But he does it in a way where he stays out of the news for bad things. But I've always been fascinated with his career arc.
Right.
Because he started as a child actor, right?
Right. And that's amazing, too, to see a lot of these people who started out as child actors. I mean, obviously with the Academy Awards, that just happened, where we've got, Short Round, as we, knew him from the Indiana Jones movies, to winning an Academy Award. And he was away for quite a while because by being in, the Indiana Jones movie, and then also Goonies, two of the biggest.
Goonies.
As a kid, then it's like people are going, well, nobody wants to see you as an adult. Well, I'm glad he pulled it off. And,
So since the early 2000s, we're talking movies, and we can go off on tangents, Greg, because I love talking movies.
Great.
You've been known as the movie review guy on Movie Show Plus. For me, as someone, like I said, to think that's a dream job, talk about this career makeover. How did you stumble into this, or was this something like, I'm going to see what I can do here?
Well, this was, I can even give you the dates. On September the 5th, 2001, my dad's side of the family was from Kalamazoo. My mom's side is from Detroit. And so my dad moved here, way back when they got married and all that. But on September the 5th, 2001, my father passed away. So I was the first kid on the east, or the east side of the state, the Bruce side, my mom's side of the family, to lose a parent. And so, I don't know if you've been through that or anybody else who has. That kind of throws you off, the first time, because it was like, okay, wait, we don't have that balance. But then also all during that time, Ron, I wasn't feeling well. And then, as you know, 5 days later was September the 11th, which just, shook all of us. I don't care, where
it changed the world. It really did.
It really did. Really did. And so eventually I just told my wife, it's like, I'm out of breath walking from here to this wall, which, as you see, is like not even a foot behind me. So she was a nurse, so she took me to the hospital. And so when we got there, the doctor, they did all these checkings and different things. They said, well, we can't find anything. And I'll probably be the only person who will ever say this. But fortunately, 10 years before, I had a blood clot. And so I told that to the doctor. I said, well, I had a blood clot, then. She said, oh, okay, let's go back and check you back. And so they did. And so she came and she said, you know what? Somebody up there really likes you. She said, you've had a massive pulmonary embolism. You should have been dead a week ago.
Wow.
And if you weren't dead, you shouldn't be here. And if you're conscious, you should be brain dead because of everything. So she said, we're going to give you this drug. And it was like 3 letters. I'm just saying ACT or something, like that. She says, it's going to take an hour for it to go in and be effective. She says, but it's a 50-50 thing. She says, it can go in, bust up all the clots, everything's good. But it can also go in and bust up all the clots, and one little piece of a clot can still travel up either to your heart or to your brain, and that's it. And I said, well, wow. I don't have really much of a choice.
Right.
So they gave me the drug, and you know how like in a hospital room, at least back in the day, there was always that clock on the wall, at the end of the bed?
Yeah.
You ever try to stare at a clock for an hour? My God, Ron, it seemed like it was 5 hours. But then finally the hour went by, they took me back down, checked me out. The clot was dissolved, and fortunately nothing traveled anywhere. So that just made me really just sit there and think about, you know what? I got to start doing some other things with my life, something I want to do. I've done enough to make other people, you know what I mean, when I say rich and all that.
Right, yeah.
But I thought, you know what? I've always loved movies. And let me put together a movie show idea. So while I was recuperating, I came up with the idea for Movie Show Plus. And at that time, I was working at Channel 20. And so I went back there, and, after like a couple of months, and I told the station director, who's a friend, I said, I came up with this idea. So she liked the idea, but Channel 20 was such a small station, they could not produce anything, themselves.
Right.
So she had told me, she said, Greg, I'll make you a deal. we'll give you a free half hour on Saturday and Sunday. You produce the show yourself, and we'll give you a place to air it. So I said, so I'll own the show. She said, yeah. Best deal ever, Ron.
Wow.
And that's how it started.
They had no idea what they were doing.
Right.
Wow.
And
wow.
So, in regards to the travel, I can now say this story because most of the people who were involved with this are not working where they were working. It was in 2000, late 2001 or early 2002. Disney was re-releasing The Lion King in IMAX.
Okay.
And so Detroit was like one of only 2 places or something at the time that actually had an IMAX theater out at the Henry Ford. And so all during that time, I would ask the people at the agency, hey, what do you have to do to get on a junket? Like, I know I can say his name. He's my buddy, Lee Thomas over, Fox 2. They said, well, Lee's been doing it for a while, and they all know him. He's already established. They said, so it might, take a little bit of time, before that happens. So it's like, okay, cool, because I was getting people who were coming into town, as well. So back to The Lion King. They called me up going, Greg, Disney wants to see at least 1 film crew. And it's like, okay. They said, we called all the other stations, but they said they can't commit to that because what if something big comes up, otherwise.
Right, yeah.
So I talked to my camera guy. Excuse me. He was busy that night, but there was a girl who I got a job at Fox Sports at the time. So I just kind of figured, well, she owes me. We said, can you run a beta cam? She says, no. Well, if we show you how to turn it on, can you fake it? And she said, sure. So we had her over to the station, showed her how to turn it on. She and I go out to the Henry Ford. I'm interviewing people left, right, and sideways. They're looking up at the old machine where, the spools are moving around, the tally light's going. And we get back to the station, look at the tape, it's black, completely black, because those cameras always had to be calibrated. But the thing is, all the people from Disney were flying back the next day.
Oh, my gosh.
Back to LA. So they weren't going to see it. They were just happy to see the camera crew. That same day, they called me up thanking me, and they said, what are you doing next weekend? I said, nothing. Want to do a junket in LA? It was like, yeah.
Wow.
And that's how
you never aired anything because the video was jacked.
Right.
Wow,
right.
That's crazy. That's crazy. And then the next weekend, you're off and running, and you don't make that mistake again, obviously.
Right.
Wow. Do you remember your first interview?
Yeah, it was for a movie called Biker Boys.
Okay.
Ice Cube was in it. He was the main one, I remember. Derek Luke. And it was all about, it wasn't necessarily a biker gang, but just these guys who like to ride motorcycles.
Sure.
It was that one. And, oh my goodness. Final Destination 2.
Oh my goodness, those movies jacked me up, especially with the planes. Oh,
yeah.
Final Destination 2. You get a lot of young people, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Allie Larder was in it.
Oh my, yeah.
And she's from Detroit. She grew up in Pleasant Ridge.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea. No idea. This wasn't one of my questions, but we were just talking about something, and I'm from Utica.
Yeah.
And Tom Sizemore just passed.
Yeah.
And most people are surprised to know that, I think his dad lived in Detroit and his mom lived in Utica. So he spent some time in Southeast Michigan. Did you ever get to sit down and talk with him, and how'd that go?
I think I did one time. I don't remember what the movie was, but yeah, we talked about him growing up in Detroit. And, just the fun times that he had here. Because, I mean, we're talking probably at least 15 years ago, for that interview. But yeah, he was a nice guy. And anytime you run into somebody who's from Detroit, that just always makes it special.
Yeah.
Because like Keegan-Michael
Mike Bender, I'm sure Mike Bender, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Mike and I we go back a long time.
I feel like I just sparked a whole bunch of thoughts in your head, Greg. I don't know if that's good or bad.
Oh, yeah. Well, back in the day, I saw myself as being a stand-up comedian. So Mark Ridley's had just opened up, and they were like way the heck out, in Oakland County. So I remember me and my buddy Jimmy Masheri, we packed lunches to drive out because it's kind of like, this is like going to Kalamazoo. So we get there, and I had to follow Mike on stage. And he was, boom, he was really into his stride. Yeah. Funny, snappy, boom, boom, boom. I got up, and Ron, I think people are still in the bathroom. 30-some years, they still haven't come, or 40 years later, they still haven't come out. And I told Mike that story, and he said he had the same thing happen to him when he had to follow Dave Coulier.
Oh, yes, yes.
He said he followed Dave, and it just always straight down.
Yeah. The Upside of Anger is always a remote drop with me. Kevin Costner and Arthur P's in that movie too. Yeah.
Love that movie. Love that film.
I know because of this, you've been doing this over 20 years now. You've interviewed hundreds of movie stars for the program.
Yes.
What are some of your favorite memories of doing that show?
Wow.
And I know it's still going, but
yeah.
I'm sure you have favorites. Yeah.
Well, two in particular. Denzel Washington. I remember the first time I was going to interview him. He was like, and still is. That was when you knew. Okay, this is a biggie.
Oh, he's one of the big. Still is.
Yeah. 2-time Academy Award winner. All guys want to be him. All ladies want to go out with him. And
just so you know, King Kong doesn't have shit on him. Just so you know.
That's right. And I just remember Ron sitting outside because they usually do the interviews like in a hotel. They'll rent like a whole floor of at a hotel and do the interviews in the rooms. So I just remember sitting out there thinking, okay, if I go in and if he's kind of dicky, oh well, he's got the right to be. Went in, introduced myself, told him where I was from, and he said, hey, man, I got family in Flint, and we used to come to Detroit, and da-da-da-da-da. From that
so cool.
First time, he treated me as if he had known me for 30 years. And one of my other favorite Denzel stories to pass along is he was in that movie Flight, where he played the drunk pilot.
Yes.
Well, at the time, I wasn't a member of any of the, Hollywood groups like the Critics' Choice Awards, which I am now, or the Hollywood Critics Association, which I am now. And so they had it set up where he was only going to be interviewed by those people because his time was limited.
Sure.
I'll never forget, we're standing in the hallway. I'm talking to a young lady friend who also did junkets. And next thing you know, she looks over my shoulders and her eyes get as big as saucers. And I looked at her and said, if somebody's coming up behind me with a knife or a gun, please tell me. Don't wait till, the end.
Right.
I feel this tap on the shoulder, turn around, and it was Denzel. And his partner, this guy, Larry, who's a good friend. And they said, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. And it's like, I then interviewed him several times.
Sure.
I said, oh, yeah, good to see you, blah, blah, blah. So Denzel said, I look forward to seeing you in there. I said, well, I'm not on the list because I'm not a member of da-da-da-da-da. He looked at Larry. Larry looked at him, and he says, see you in there. Next thing you know, the girls from the studio come running down the hall. Greg, Denzel requested that you be here. We'll have to put you at the end because of, the other people already scheduled. They said, so we'll keep you over an extra day, if you don't mind, and we'll fly out tomorrow morning. And it's like, extra day at the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills on your
Let
time?
go of my
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm good. And I figure, he did that. And like I said, all the other times since, it's just always been a great relationship. And then for actresses, so many.
Another master of his craft. We talked about Bridges earlier, but Denzel is in that category, I think.
For sure.
It's exceptional. I mean, go on. I'm sorry to
cut
you
no.
off. I just nerded out
That's just
there.
and as far as actresses, so many. I mean, love talking to Halle Berry. That was funny. When she was in John Wick, what was it, 2 or 3? I don't remember.
It was 3, I believe.
4 is coming out, now. Went into her room to interview her, and she'd had kind of like a cold or something. Mm-hmm. And so I walked in, and we've talked to each other, for a long time as well. Hi, good to see you. Good to see you. She said, I'd love to give you a hug, but I've got this cold. And I said, I don't care. I'll catch the Halle Berry flu, whatever.
That's hilarious.
But
I'll have the Halle Berry COVID. Sign me up.
That's right. That's right. But then another great one is Julia Roberts. I just love talking to her. And, I walk into the room with her, and she's going, hey, and she is one, hey, baby, come give mama a hug. Hey, all right, pretty woman, I'll do it.
She strikes me as someone who's just full of life.
Yeah, I mean, just a fun person. There was one time, giving a shout out now to a Detroit product. I went in, and I was wearing my Shinola watch. He goes, oh, that's a nice watch. And I told her, I said, yeah, Shinola from Detroit, da-da-da-da-da. She says, let me see it. So I took it off so she could, feel it. Then she put it on. She says, I'm going to keep this. And I said,
I don't think so.
Right. I said, what for the fact my wife gave this to me for a very special birthday? I'd say, go ahead. And so she laughed. She said, no. But here it is. I think she even went out and bought one herself. So
that's awesome. Is there anyone that surprised you or said something that you weren't expecting? You were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening.
Oh, geez. I know that there have been. I mean, honestly, I can't think of anything specific. But yeah, like when you'll ask a person a question and their answer is not exactly what you were expecting. Or, better still, I won't say the actor's name, but I just interviewed somebody for this dynamic movie that's coming out this weekend with Keanu Reeves, but it's not Keanu Reeves. And the guy was having so much fun. He cussed every other word. And I'm sitting there going, I can't use this interview, even though it's great as all outdoors. But, things like that where you're just going to sit there and go,
yeah,
okay.
I can't use that because you're swearing. Use it. Yeah.
But, for the most part, most people have always been nice.
Well, which leads to my next question. Ever do an interview that turned into a shit show? Like, no matter what you asked them, they just didn't want to be there?
I'm trying to think. Yeah, there have been a couple. I usually don't say the names, just so it doesn't, get out.
Yeah.
But, yeah, there's this one actor who's known as the biggest grump. And he just kind of grunted, during the whole thing. And that's all I ran of the interview. I'd ask, so Ron, did you have fun doing this movie? I mean, I would ask questions. Yep. So was it a good time working with so-and-so? Did you have fun on location? Yep. And that was it.
Roll with it. Roll with it.
Right.
Nothing you can do. It's not my fault. This is this guy's issue. We're just going to move on.
There was another one where I'll tell you off camera, who the person was, but we were at the Toronto Film Festival, and this one actor came in from partying all night long, and it was him and another one, because, sometimes they'll put two people together. The one was so drunk, he fell asleep with his head on the other guy's shoulder. We all just laughed.
Probably drool coming out of his mouth, right? Yeah.
And the one actor just going, okay, he's going to love seeing this, when he wakes up.
What was it, the movie? You remember the movie America's Sweethearts?
Oh, yeah.
At the end, when Christopher Walken comes in with this great film. Is that how a junket is?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part.
The way they portray that in the film?
Right, where they'll have all the press, put up in a hotel. They show you the movie the day before, then you do the interviews the next day. In fact, that was another thing that made me want to do it, too, get into doing this. Because I actually saw it in L.A. I used to do work with Jerry Lewis for the telethon. I was the host here in Detroit. Great. So I happened to be out there. That movie came out, and I saw it, and I thought, wow, this is great. This is unique. But, yeah, that's what they do. They send you places, and they put you in the hotel room, just like you saw, in that movie, and they would do the interviews. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's another fun. I love America's Sweethearts. John Cusack's another one of my favorites. All right, I could talk to you more and more about these movies, but I do want to move on. Talk to me about Wilshire One Productions.
Oh, that's a company that I started up, the name obviously from Wilshire Boulevard in California. And we're a smaller production company. We produce, or at least are half the producer now of Movie Show Plus. I also work with a guy named Tom Santilli, and he's the one who puts it all together. And yeah, we do a lot of different little things. In fact, got something coming up this weekend. We're shooting a band and, much more smaller productions. We're the ones where you need something, like for your demo or something like that. We can put it together for you. But yeah, it's been going on for, good grief, almost 20 years with that as well.
Between all your production work, I also want to ask you, have something really nothing to do with broadcasting, but I mean, you're a Detroit fella. You're doing Detroit tours. Talk about this. Most people don't know this about you. This is kind of cool what you do.
Yeah, I've got a company called Russell Brothers City Tours. And the way how that started out was it was Christmas Eve or Christmas time, I think it was 2017. And my wife and I and our daughter and her husband were at an event downtown. And so usually when time to go home, I would always ask my wife, can I take the scenic route? Which basically means just going up Woodward. Right. And normally she would always go, just get on the freeway because we know you're going to tell your stories. And it's like, well, that's part of what I like to do. So, but she gave in. I think it was because it was Christmas time. So I'm driving up and I'm pointing out, like what used to be there, what used to go on here and da-da-da-da-da. And so my daughter said, you know what, Pop? You know so much about Detroit. Why don't you just give tours? And, it had been mentioned to me before. And I thought, you know what? For once I'm going to take her up on it. So I got home and I called up my brother Cliff Russell, who, another big-time broadcaster in Detroit, was Mayor Dennis Archer's press secretary.
Yeah.
First African-American press secretary for a Major League Baseball team, the Detroit Tigers, award winner at WWJ and all that. And Cliff knew everything, about the city. So I told him, I said, why don't we do this spring of 2018? And so he said, yeah, sounds like a good idea. And as I always make the joke, and in typical Cliff form, it was like, you put it all together, Greg, and I'll show up.
And I'll be there.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like,
I'll be there. You do all the hard work, and I'll show up and let people know great this organization, because I'm Cliff. You're not related to Walker D, are you?
No.
Okay. I didn't even think to dawn on you until you said Cliff, and I was like, yeah, there's a lot of Russells.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to ask specifically about your Detroit roots, because one of how we came to talk is you were working with the Motown folks even now. They just did the renovation to the Motown Museum. What can you talk about? Why should people get their butt back out to check out the museum now that they've done the renovation? Seems like a lot of cool things happening over there.
It really is. And first and foremost, like you said, if you've never been to the Motown Museum and you live here in this community, go. It is truly a gem of not just Detroit, but I mean the world. Seeing where all the great music came from. And I mean, and it's ours, Detroiters, it's ours. And as far around as the renovations, oh my goodness. Because obviously they can't touch the studio, the blue white building, because that's got the plaque in front. And so they can, paint.
The Studio A, right? Studio A is the name of the stuff. Yeah.
So, they can paint it and do different things like that. But, anytime you've got that plaque, you can't go in and tear it down and rebuild. But the other buildings which they own, which are right next door, like the next three, you'll still drive by right now. You'll see the front where the facade looks like, a two-family flat home from the 1950s, still looking that way. You go into the back, it is just unbelievable. State-of-the-art studios for video, recording, dance lessons, and I mean, just so much stuff going on. They've also bought up all the property behind them. That's where they're going to build a theater, which I think they're really going to break ground on sometime this year, because they're hoping it's up next year. Very
exciting. Yeah.
And, just to make it its own kind of village. I mean, more so like the way the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is, how they've got everything where they can do, shows, concerts, and, different things like that. That's how it's going to be set up down there. But it's just fascinating. Again, if you've never been and you're a Detroiter, go. But that's another funny part. I'll just throw this in, because a lot of times I will talk to folks, from the city. Have you ever been? They go, no. And I used to think, okay, that's weird. But then there was the one time when I was coming back from Liverpool for that movie, and our flight attendant was a young lady from Liverpool. I was wearing a Motown shirt, and she goes, Motown? Oh, I love Motown. In fact, she said she had taken her mom and grandmother there 3 times, and they were planning to go the following year.
That's awesome.
I said, oh, that's great. I said, now, do you go to all the Beatles stuff? Because they've got, obviously, the Beatles Museum and all this. She says,
sure.
No. They're kind of like us. It's like, nah.
It's just secondhand. You take it for granted because we're here. That's there. I always learn something new when I go to the Detroit Museum, and I'm liking some of the other cities. Like, for example, doing this docuseries, I went to Memphis and I toured the Stax Records.
Yeah.
And I toured Sun Studio, which was but that's what. When you go into Sun Studio, it very much feels like Studio A in the sense of this is pristine. In fact, when I've went to Motown and you stand in Studio A, if you're not getting chills just being in that room,
right,
there's something wrong with you, because and when you find out the story of how they got that sound within that room, it's just fascinating. And I can't wait to get in there since they've done the renovations. I'm so excited.
Let me know. We'll get you in.
Before we wrap, Greg, it's a common question I ask. So Radio Dayz the podcast.
Yes.
I have to ask, in your purview, in your opinion, what is the state of terrestrial radio today, and how can it improve in your?
Wow. Well, obviously, like you said, it's changed a lot. Because again, when I first started, there were live people 24 hours, 7 days a week. There would be the person from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and so on and so forth. Now, for the most part, I think a lot of radio stations are just the morning person's live and the afternoon drive person. And everything else is just kind of syndicated, which takes away, from the, personality of somebody being in the city with you. And because, and unfortunately, I don't think that's going to change because of, saves money. And also now, you can get whatever music or whatever you want, anytime you want, right here.
Yeah.
So I'll be in the mood to listen to Beatles and Motown. I can just go, hey, sorry, I don't want to say her name. She'll come back on. Play this. And I think it's a deal where I kind of feel bad, for young people today not being able or to know what a great experience it was. I mean, you remember those days of, again, sitting next to your radio with your finger on your tape recorder, waiting for them to say, and now here's the new one from the Beatles, and recording it, making your own tape so you could have it.
It was part of our everyday lives.
Yeah. And
it really was. It was part of who we were, and it's a shame to see where it's at. But we evolve as people, and I think we're more visual than ever before, because even people who are fans of radio like you and I, we would likely watch a video before we'll listen to audio only in some cases.
Right.
Unless we're working out or something to that effect. But yeah. What's next for Greg Russell? You got a lot on your plate now, but what's next for you? What mountain are you about to climb? Because you never stop, sir.
Well, one thing I've been doing recently is it's kind of like the giving back. I do after school drama classes at Denby High in Detroit every Monday and Tuesday, and I enjoy working with the young people, helping them build their career and to get into this business. I tell them, I said, even though it's an acting class, but acting can also be done, like you said, on radio and TV, because you've got to know how to present yourself and how to talk to an audience. So I'm enjoying that right now. Got a couple other special things, which I can't say just yet, but I will come back and tell you all about them, which I really look forward to.
That'd be great. Greg, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your broadcast story. Much appreciated, sir.
Ron, always great to talk to you. I always enjoy it. I mean, this is that, almost like the fireside chat. We're just sitting down, you're talking to a buddy about, do you remember that time we did this in radio? And what were their names?
Somebody needs to make a movie about all our experiences. It would be a comedy.
Oh, I mean, I just always think about that movie FM. I'll just say this real quick. When that first came out, they had a special screening at the old Universal Movie Theater in Warren, and every DJ was there, and it was just such a blast. There was a girl, Kim Carson, who used to be on WDRQ back in the day.
Yes, Kim Carson. I remember her.
Yep. Yeah. She and I were dear friends, so we went together, and it was just like, oh my God. Alex Karras is a DJ. Cleavon Little.
Alex Karras, the Detroit Lion?
Yeah.
He was in Against All Odds as well. He was the bad guy.
Yeah.
Remember? Yeah.
And also, one of my all-time favorites, Blazing Saddles. Mungo.
Cool. That could not be made today, my man. That could not be made today. Oh, my gosh. I miss Richard Pryor. I just miss that guy. Thanks again to Greg Russell, and thank you for checking out Radio Dayz the Podcast. Today's show was brought to you by Team 71 Mortgage Group. Are you looking to buy or refinance your home and have questions that need answers now? Call Brian Allure. Call Brian Allure at 810-444-6466. Today's show is produced by Ron Robinson Studios. If you need professional marketing videos or professional photography, headshots, maybe you need drone video from a licensed drone pilot, head over to ronrobinsonstudios.com. You can also hear previous episodes of Radio Dayz the Podcast there as well. Also, if you'd like to learn more about the upcoming documentary series about the history of radio, Radio Dayz 101 Years of Radio, click on the Radio Dayz the Movie icon under the Documentaries tab at, you guessed it, ronrobinsonstudios.com. Thanks again for checking out the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time.
You can't go! All the plants are gonna die!